Welcome, everyone. I see that we have quite a number of participants on our LinkedIn stream and Zoom. If you don't already know me, I am David, lead instructor of Salesforce on Clarusway. Introducing our esteemed guest speaker for tonight's event, Garry Bolles. Garry is a globally recognized speaker, author, and consultant on the future of work and the transformation of learning. As the chair for the future of work at Singularity University, he advises leaders on how to navigate the rapidly changing job market and help organizations from startups to Fortune 500 companies to develop strategies for success in the digital age. Garry's expertise and insights are highly valued in the community, and we are honored to have him speak to our Clarusway students. His wealth of knowledge on the latest trends and best practices in the industry will undoubtedly be a valuable asset to our students as they embark on their own career-shifting journeys. Please join us in welcoming Garry Bolles to tonight's event. Welcome, Garry.
Oh, thank you so much. Apparently, I can't turn on my video.
One moment.
Yeah, technical challenge.
One moment, sorry. Let me talk
problem.
to my tech guy. Yes, you can turn on your camera, and if you would like to share your screen, please feel free to share your screen, Garry.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. All right. Now, as we're fond of saying at Singularity University, AI, artificial intelligence, is easy, but AV, audiovisual, is hard. So we always assume, there's going to be some glitch with Zoom or camera or something like that. So
Yeah.
Anyway, no, thank you so much for the invitation. Really looking forward. I'd love to make this as interactive a session as possible. I'd love to make sure that people are asking questions and getting the information that they need. It's common that I don't actually really know what sort of people are thinking about, but you were so gracious to ask for questions ahead of time. So for those of you who sent in questions, I've actually used those questions to completely construct what our session is going to look like. So I wanted to offer a range of thoughts, and then I was just going to suggest we just go through those questions, and then hopefully people can be throwing questions and ideas in the chat, and then we can have a healthy discussion after a half hour or so.
Thank you. Let me remind to participants, you can use the Q&A chat to ask your questions, and then I will ask the questions to the Garry at the end of the session.
Great.
Floor is yours, Garry.
All right, wonderful. All right, so I have a gift in the that I've been given in the opportunity to talk to so many different people, as he was just saying, to a wide variety of different people around the world, from CEOs of companies to my wife and I have done workshops for refugee youth in Amman, Jordan, and native New Zealand Maori teenagers in New Zealand. We get a chance to be able to talk to students at colleges around the world. I was just at Tecnológico de Monterrey last month. I'll be at University of Guadalajara this month, and all of that is a tremendous opportunity for me to learn what's going on in the minds of so many people that are living through these extraordinary times. So I wanted to maybe give you a little bit of the framing, like how I think about these things, and then show you some slides, and then let's make it a healthy discussion. So I want to encourage all of you to either be taking notes or to use the chat as a thought bubble, like don't have to just ask questions, but if there's ideas that it sparks for you or anything like that, throw them in the chat. It's one of the things it's one of the gifts that we get in the post-COVID era is I can't see thought bubbles over your head if we were in a lecture hall, but this is where we can actually be talking to each other and sharing the questions and issues. I do have to say, you don't have to agree with a single thing that I say. That is, if you disagree or there's a different perspective or you have different lived experience, then let's talk about that, because each of us has, a completely unique set of experiences and backgrounds. So anyway, so I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to show some slides. Now, all these slides are going to be available to all of you if you want to be able to watch along as we go. I'm going to pop the link into the chat, so you can even jump ahead if you want, and see if there's some questions that you want to be able to make sure that we're covering. But feel free, if you don't want to take notes, or then you'll have the slides to be able to come back to again. So this is the link. These are the slides that I'm using right now. All right. So and yet again, one of the gifts of the post-COVID era. So all right. So as we were just saying, I actually have a range of different hats that I spin constantly. So I've written a book called The Next Rules of Work. The subtitle is The Mindset, Skill Set, and Tool Set to Lead Your Organization Through Uncertainty. But it's not really just for organizations. It's for each of us as individuals. And I'll sort of give you some of that framing, but really how to navigate these unusual times. And the book came out pretty recently, so it reflects a lot of the learnings that we have going through this unique, what I call the Great Reset. I'm the chair for the future of work with Singularity University, Singularity Group. And it's neither about the singularity nor is it a university. We can talk about the singularity, but it's basically it's not a university because we're more like a boot camp. We change our curriculum every 2 days or 2 weeks, and you can't be a certified college in the U.S. without freezing your curriculum for 2 years. So I've got 9 courses on LinkedIn Learning. Now actually a 10th one just launched, Skills for Leading the Future of Work. But I've got 1.3 million learners that have taken courses like Leading Change, Learning Mindset, Learning Agility, and I'll give you some insights from those courses. We've got a small but mighty software company that is focused on career decision making called eParachute, eParachute.com. It's built from the knowledge of a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which is the world's career manual. I'll talk about some of those insights. And then I've got this small but mighty consulting firm. And that's how I end up working with so many different groups around the world. So those are some of the different hats that I spin, and I'll keep on jumping into different contexts as your questions sort of guide where we go. But as I looked at the range of questions that so many of you submitted, they sort of fell into 3 different buckets or bins for me. There are a lot of questions about the big picture, like what's going on, this future of work thing, all that sort of stuff. There were specific questions around strategies for each of you in your work, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem. And then there were questions specifically about success in that ecosystem, like now that you've had this training and you're thinking about how you provide value in that ecosystem. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of that too. And surely when you want to ask some of your questions at the end, if you want to get into like just how you understand the ecosystem and the needs of customers and the value to be created, we can spend some time on that too. But let's start off with the big picture. So one of the first questions was, what's your opinion on the all-inclusive term, the future of work? So my title with Singularity is Chair for the Future of Work. And I often say I'm not a futurist, even though it says future in my title. Instead, I think of possibilities. I think of trends and helping people to understand those possibilities and those trends that I see. And then you can sort of draw your own line. But what I've found is that people have certain concerns and certain questions when they talk about the future of work. And here's kind of what they typically fall into, right? So I often say, I try to not oversimplify, but I try to distill things down so we can sort of come at them from a common frame of reference. And I find that questions related to the future of work tend to fall into one or all of 4 different domains: individuals, organizations, communities, and countries. And there are issues for each one of us in those different domains. So what do we care about as individuals? If I could wave a magic wand and we all could have the future of work that we wanted, the question I hear the most is, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically, how can I either find or create meaningful, well-paid work today and tomorrow? And if I could wave a magic wand and every person on the planet could have that, it wouldn't solve everything, but it would actually make a much better future. Oh, okay. So that's for us as individuals. What about organizations? If you ran an organization, what would you care about? Well, organizations, what they do is they create value for a set of stakeholders, customers, shareholders, hopefully for their workers, for the communities in which they operate, and for the planet. But they create value for those stakeholders. And if you ran a company, when you run a company, you're going to want to have talented people who can create that value for your stakeholders today and tomorrow. Now, if you're living in a community, and I think pretty much all of us do, even if you're a digital nomad, you're still in a community. And if you were really engaged with a community, what would people want? Well, they typically want everybody to thrive. You look around, I live in San Francisco, we've got a lot of challenges. There's a lot of issues that we're dealing with. If everybody in our community could thrive, then we'd have a better world, right? So that's what we should care about, each of us individually, and the communities in which we function, in which we live, and with which we interact. We should want everybody to be able to thrive. And then when I sit down with ministers of labor, ministers of education in countries ranging from Brazil to Tunisia, basically what they want is what are the strategies at the high level? Like, how can everyone in our country or our region thrive? Now again, this isn't all the questions. It's not all the issues. And of course, what's not uncommon is people then want to say, oh, but what about robots and software? What if all these new AI tools suddenly take all of our jobs? Well, we'll talk about some of those potential impacts. But when we're thinking about the future of work, your future of work, then what you sort of think about is, well, now how can you make sure that everybody is participating in one or more of these domains? That is, are you focusing on how you can find or create meaningful, well-paid work, or how others can? If you're running an organization, are you focusing on how you have a team, or you have the talented people you need to solve problems, and so on? So anyway, that's the way I think about the future of work, is how we can continually help in each of these domains for people to have the agency, the ability to be able to have an influence in how they are continually trying to ensure that we all have a more positive future of work. So that was the first question that I saw. The second was, okay, so according to you now, what's the ideal future workplace? So if you have a magic wand, how do you make the perfect workplace for every human being on the planet? So first off, it's important to realize there's a lot of press, there's a lot of headlines that you're going to see about the future of work. Most of them are written by people that are kind of writers, they're journalists. I'm a recovering journalist. I used to run 6 technology magazines. And so what do they see? They see, oh, I'm working from home, I'm working remote. That's what I should write about. Well, it turns out, depending upon the economy, certainly in America, 60% of all jobs can't be remote. They have to be in person. You can't serve dinner in a restaurant from remote unless you've got a robot. So we're only talking about 40% of the jobs actually have the potential to be this sort of remote workplace. So now, what would the workplace, the ideal workplace, be for each one of us? And again, I'm going to come back to this whole idea of agency. Like, if we could wave a magic wand, what would it look like? So there are 6 W's of work. I'm going to focus on 5 of them, and we'll talk about the 6th in a little bit. But what, where, when, who, and how. So the what of work, and I'll give you a little more detail on this, but is basically how we solve problems. And a lot of times when we solve problems, they're put into projects, and especially if you're working in the Salesforce ecosystem, you're going to be involved in a lot of projects. And there's lots of other things that we do. We collaborate, we create, we co-create, and so on. But if you were to distill it down, the what of work is problems and projects. Where we do it, that's a workplace, but I like to use the word workspace because that gives a sense like there's more things that we can do. Not just it's a place that we either go to and work in a cubicle and then go home, but it's actually a workspace where it's optimized for us. When we do our work, we found many of us, when we were either working or learning in school or in an office, suddenly now in the COVID era, we're working distributed. Oh, well, we have rhythm. There's times of day, times of the week, times of the month where we're actually better doing certain kinds of work. And then the who, well, there's often we're working with a team, especially if we're doing project-based work. And then the how is a role. Like, are we a team member? Are we guiding a team? That sort of thing. So now, what if I gave you a magic wand and you had perfect knowledge about what the most optimal work for you was, the workplace or the workspace that was perfect for you at any time of the day, of the week, or a month? Well, it would be kind of like sliders. You might be brainstorming in a co-working facility in the morning with your coworkers, and you would be what we used to call a manager or a supervisor, and what I call a team guide. And then you suddenly shift context, and you might be collaborating in a park in the afternoon with a group of partners, and you're a team member. So think of that as agency. Think of that as flexibility. Think of that as control. And what if every human could have that level of control? Well, we don't. Life's not perfect. But the most optimal workspaces are the ones where each of us as human beings have the most flexibility and the most ability to collaborate and agree with our team, our partners, whoever it is that we're interacting with, as to what the optimal would be. Now, the old rules of work, you're seeing lots of headlines about how there's a lot of CEOs that are saying, nope, get your butt back into the office. This is how we're going to work. But there's actually lots of companies that are experimenting with this. And if you want to just see what the range of options are, just Google Flex Index. And what you'll see is this, it's actually a company called Flex. And what they've done is they have they've got 4,000 companies that they have profiled, all the different ways they do this sort of flexible work stuff. And then if you want to be able to think about those issues in your own work, and you want to be able to have a worksheet that could help you to figure out like what those pieces are, I actually have a worksheet that I call the Aristotle Canvas. And what it is it's these the 6 W's, and we'll get to the 6th in a little bit. But this is actually a worksheet you can go through, and you can look at all these different elements, and you can, in 15 minutes, you can actually put down on paper some bullet points of some of the things that you would feel would have some of those elements of the optimal work situation for you. So I'd highly recommend you do that. You take that time, and then, you know, I think what you have the opportunity to do is then to think about, all right, for the project I'm working on now, how could I get some of that flexibility? For the kinds of projects or the kinds of jobs I want to do in the future, what do I think would be optimal for me? And that's actually a process. Hopefully, most organizations have this mindset that it's a process. And there are some companies, there's organizations around the world. What they do is every week or two, they actually plan as a team where, when, what they'll be doing, and so on. And that's an opportunity to be thinking about for the project that you do. All right, so that's the second question about ideal future workplace. I'm going to put the third and fourth questions together. So one was, how do you think these workplace technologies like artificial intelligence and automation are affecting the job market? And what specific industries or job roles will you think will be most affected? So I'm going to put this together with another one. So how do you believe workplace technology, specifically artificial intelligence and automation in the future, is going to change how we view our work and our relationships? So I'm going to give you a couple of quick ideas on this, and then we'll dive more into the questions and answers. But as you can imagine, this is a set of questions I get so often. And so here's a couple ways to be able to think about it. First off, it's important to think about the history of the future of work. And in my book, The Next Rules of Work, I walk through the history of the future of work. And you probably know that automation has changed work for centuries, and actually for literally thousands of years. Aristotle, believe it or not, he worried that robots were going to do the work of musicians and there wouldn't be work for musicians. And he worried that 2,000 years ago. So there's been worries about automation. This is actually called a loom weaver. And in the 1700s, people used to do a lot of weaving by hand. And then this technology came along, and it was only owned by people that could afford it. So very rich people. And then you had to, if you used to do your own weaving, you had to work for one of these guys. And there was always guys. And then they would reduce your wages so that they could make more money. And a whole bunch of weavers got really upset about that. And they called themselves Luddites, and they went around destroying looms. And it wasn't because they were against technology, it's because they were against the business model of the people who owned the technology. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Is robots and software don't take jobs. Robots and software just automate tasks. And I'll sort of show you how that works. But it's a human's decision if a job goes away. And so when we see all these new AI tools come out, and you see a lot of headlines about people just so completely concerned that all these jobs are going to evaporate because ChatGPT is going to automate them. If that were to happen, those would be the decisions of humans. It wouldn't be because suddenly some robot overlord took over a job. It would be because a human said, oh, I can save money, or I can make more money if I have people just be more productive and I don't have to hire as many people. So this is the way it has been through centuries of the impact of technology. And when we look at these new tools, so you've seen the headlines, that the most recent version of ChatGPT can pass pretty much every test on the planet. Oh, well, the reason for that is that the data set that it's searching is what we would search if we were studying for those courses. So of course it can pass all these courses. It was designed to do that. So how do we think instead about automation? And especially because many of you are using your skills in the technical arena. How do we think about sort of how that works? Well, here's one way to think about work. Work is basically just three things. Work is a problem to be solved, and it doesn't matter if it's a dirty floor or a complex piece of software to be written. It's a problem to be solved. How do we solve problems? We perform tasks. If it's a dirty floor, we go get a broom, we sweep the floor. Those are tasks, steps we go through. How do we perform those tasks? Oh, we have human skills. So that's kind of it. This is work. Human skills applied to tasks to solve problems, right? So I hope that makes sense to you. So robots and software do not take jobs. They automate tasks. They do that thing in the middle. They don't have skills. They simply perform activity. They're performing tasks. And so we as humans, we lump all those tasks together and we apply software to them. They say, oh, well, we don't need to pay somebody for that job. But that's a human that decided it. So the way I urge us all to think about this is, sure, software changes things just like the loom weaving machines change things. And if we are all continually adaptive, we are continually focusing on being problem solvers, if we think instead of those technologies as giving us superpowers, we can leverage those technologies and we can continually surf the wave of the new problems to be solved. So I actually knocked this out in Midjourney. Actually, a lot of my images here are straight out of the current AI generation program. So artificial intelligence tools can help to automate a bunch of tasks that you don't have to do the boring stuff. They can help you to learn more about your own skills. You can inventory them. They can help you to develop new skills. They can help you to collaborate on projects with others. They can enhance your skills. They can give you superpowers. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn that's free to everybody. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm G Bolles everywhere on the internet, GBOLLES. And I wrote a 5-part series. And the first one was AI's Quiet Tsunami. But I talked about a lot of these issues related to how artificial intelligence tools are changing work and changing learning. And those can give you some insights about some of the ways that you can be thinking about how you would be able to leverage these tools. All right, so the first segment we were going through was this whole thing about the big picture. Now let's jump into strategies for you as an individual. Again, another AI picture generated by Midjourney, leading a team through a jungle. So one of the questions was, are there best practices we have to follow in the workplace, given all this change that's going on, where work can be more purposeful for our job or our career? So I told you there were 6 W's, and I didn't mention why. So what about why? So think about this. Think about if you've had any jobs at all, or if you've just gone through a boot camp after graduating high school and you haven't yet gone into the world of work, but I'm going to say pretty likely just about everybody on this call, you've done some kind of job. And what's the first thing that you want in a job? It's to be paid for. So around the world, I'm known by 2 names. I'm known as Professor Garry or Uncle G. If you're 25 and under, typically you call me Uncle G. And I get calls all the time from young people that I mentor. Uncle G, I just got a job. Oh, that's great. That's great. What are they paying you? Dead silence. I forgot to ask. Oh, okay. Well, you'll figure it out, right? Because what did you want? You just want to get a paycheck. You just want to get paid, right? Okay. So the first deliverable when you're just starting out in the world of work is what you can get paid for. And then I hope what somebody does is they put an arm around your shoulder and they take you aside and they say, you know what? If you get really good at this, you get paid better. Okay. So now these are what I called the old rules of work. What you can get paid for and what you're good at. Your parents did this, your grandparents did this, they fed their families, they put a roof over their head, and that was all they needed to do. That was work, right? Well, it just so happens that my father came along 50 years ago. He was a recovering minister, and he ended up writing the World's Career Manual, a book called What Color is Your Parachute? And I was actually trained in his methods when I was 19. And what my father said 50 years ago was, if I give you the permission to also do what you love, to feel that there's purpose in your work, it doesn't mean that you have to love every moment of it. You might just be using skills that you love. You might be focusing on problems you love to solve. You might be working with the kinds of people that you love to work with. But if I gave you that permission to have that sort of North Star or Southern Cross in your life, then you might not have to give up getting paid well for it or being good at it. You might if you change fields, but here, especially if you've gone through boot camp, you've been trained, if you had the opportunity to continually focus on the kinds of projects that you loved working on, then that would feel like more purpose in life. But in the old rules of work, maybe some people got there, some people didn't. And then maybe when they retired, maybe when your parents or your grandparents retired and they worked in the local food bank or in their community, they would do something that the world needs. So those of you who might have read about this before, you'll recognize this is called ikigai. And in Japan, and especially in Okinawa, where this is widely practiced, the belief is that a life is not well lived unless you have all four of these. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have all four of them every moment of the day. As a matter of fact, for a lot of people, it's almost kind of like a ladder or a stack. You sort of work out at the base level of just making money, and then hopefully you work your way up a little bit. But a lot of people don't give themselves permission to do what they love or to do what the world needs. What we find for so many people, younger especially, but also older people nowadays, in a world of what we call exponential change, is they're reversing this ladder. They're reversing the stack. They're saying, well, what does the world need? You have these, I call these your digital distraction machines. You've got these devices that tell you the world's problems. They come to you, so you don't have to go looking for them. You know what is in the mind of the head of a country that's under attack 5 minutes after he thinks it, because it's on YouTube, right? So you don't have to go looking for the world's problems. So many young people are saying, I want to do what the world needs. I want to do what my community needs. I want to do what certain populations need or what the planet needs. And if I can do that, that's what I love. And if I love it, I'll get good at it. And if I get good at it, I'll get paid for it. I get CEOs of companies asking me all the time, why do young people ask me all the time about purpose for my company? And this is the answer. It's a generational shift in how we think about the role of work in our lives. And recent surveys really support this. This was a study done of Gen Z just last year, and a third of young people will say the things that matter most to them are human rights, social justice, innovation, healthcare, and the environment. So that's a lot, and it's a lot of things related to purpose. So think about in your world, for your work, what are the drivers? And I'll give you some examples of how you can figure that out. But what are the drivers, the things that pull you? What's the North Star or the Southern Cross that sort of drags you, that is the magnet that pulls you into something about your work that motivates you? And I'll give you some insights for doing that. If this topic interests you, look up Jeremy Lent's book, The Web of Meaning. He's got some great ideas for how you think about purpose and meaning in your life. All right, so the next question that I heard was, so what about lifelong learning and continuous development of skills? In the modern job market, the shelf life of information just keeps decaying. If you got taught as a full stack programmer, or in many cases, a lot of the skills that you were taught, especially the special information, what I call the no skills of doing work in the Salesforce ecosystem, that changes really rapidly. How do you stay up with that? How do you incorporate these practices into your career? So let me give you a model for thinking about your career, and then we'll talk specifically about skills. So I call the model that we're all coming to adopt, this next model, I call this a portfolio of work. And this comes from, again, my father's work. He wrote, after he wrote this book, What Color Is Your Parachute, he wrote a book called The Three Boxes of Life. And he said, you know, I think most of us, we kind of have sort of three big steps in our life. We get this big chunk of education, this big chunk of learning, then we have a big chunk of work, and then we have this little chunk of leisure in what I call the period formerly known as retirement. If you think about that, well, that made a lot of sense in your parents' era, your grandparents' era. When you had the old rules of work, you learned to be a doctor or a plumber or a technician and heating and air conditioning. And then you were able to basically make that investment work over a long career in the same field. And then you'd get a gold watch and retire. But that's not the world that you inherited. You inherited a world that changes a lot more. So what we see a lot of times is a young person comes out of high school, college, vocational school, a boot camp, and sure, they get a day job, but they're still learning online. And then they might take a gap month with their friends, and then they have another day job, but they're working on a startup with their friends, and they're driving for Uber at night. It's a constantly shifting landscape of work and learning and leisure by intention. That is, you are assembling these pieces as you go along. So I call this portfolio of work a new model for how we can think about the ways that we have agency to design our work. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a day job. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be doing one job, one set of work activities for one employer. But increasingly, if you feel the agency, you want the variety, you feel that you can develop this portfolio of work, you're in an era where it's far more possible than it has ever been before. But if you're going to have a portfolio of work, you've got to have a portfolio of learning. That is, you have to be committed to continually learning, to continually developing new skills so that you will be able to solve the problems for employers today and tomorrow. All right, so now what about skills? So the question was, what are the skills or attributes you think are most important when we're looking for jobs or we're trying to create work so I can succeed in this market that keeps changing? And how do we cultivate those skills or attributes? So first, let's talk about what skills are and how to think about them. And then let's talk about which ones. All right, so when I talk about the next rules of work, the whole idea is, how do we as humans, how do we keep on changing? How do we keep on adapting? And I say, well, the answer is kind of simple. There's three legs of the stool for this: mindset, skill set, and tool set. So I'm going to talk about skill set in just a second, but what's the difference between those? So I wave a magic wand and you are standing at the foot of a mountain. This just happens to be Amadablam in Nepal, and I've stood about exactly at this point looking up at the mountain. On a trek. And so I have given you, when I waved my magic wand, I have given you all the skill set of a mountain climber, but none of the mindset. And you look up at the top of the mountain and you say, oh, that looks too cold. That looks too high. You have all the skill set, but none of the mindset. You won't climb the mountain. So I wave the magic wand again, and now you have all the mindset of a mountain climber and none of the skill set. But you say, well, how hard is that? You take one step, two steps. You solve problems just in time and just in the context. You don't go back for a 4-year mountain climbing degree, right? You pull out your digital distraction machine, you watch some videos about getting over a col, and you go to the next problem. And then eventually you're standing at the top of the mountain and you look down and you say, well, how hard was that? So as I'm fond of saying, a 21st century skill set is critical, and I'll tell you how to think about that. But mindset eats skill set for lunch. If you're about to walk into a meeting with your coworkers and you think, we can do this, we can solve this problem, you are just as right as if you think you can't. So mindset eats skill set for lunch, but you still need a pretty good skill set. And if you are facing an ice wall, you also need a good tool set. So it doesn't matter how good your mindset or skill set is, you got to have a good pickaxe. You got to have good boots. And so I'll talk about tool set and when we talk more about these AI tools, but basically mindset, it's critical to have this growth mindset. We'll talk more about that. But when you're trying to develop a skill set, it's important to have some focus, some understanding as to what you need, the kinds of skills you want to develop. So again, I can wave my magic wand. What would that 21st century skill set be? Well, first, there's a problem to solve. And that's that we as humans, we are icebergs. If I asked you to list me your top 10 favorite skills based on the level of your ability and how much you love using them, most people peter out after 2 or 3. And the reason is there's a peculiar part of the way that our minds work, our neuroscience, that basically treats things we have accomplished as a done deal. That is, we think everybody else can do it. We climb to the top of the mountain, but why can't anybody else climb to the top of the mountain? But the truth is, we are icebergs, and there's all this human potential. There's all these experiences you've already had. There's all these skills you have developed below the waterline. We don't even see them. And so this is the whole person. This is all of you. And when people hire us, they're often only looking for that little bit above the waterline as well. And so what many people, especially young people nowadays, want is to be treated as a whole person in their job. And then they want, and there's another study of Gen Zs, they want to be trained. They want to have the skills they want employers to help them to continually develop the skills to advance their career, pathways to promotion, professional development opportunities. These are absolutely in demand. So how do you think about that? Well, you have this unique mix of skills nobody else in the world has. And it's really, really important to continually inventory them. And I'll give you some ideas for how to do that. But you have basically 3 different kinds of skills. You have bodies of knowledge. So you've learned about the Salesforce ecosystem, and a lot of that's anchored in the way Salesforce's tools work. You also have flex skills, skills usable in a range of situations. If you, when you were 5 years old and it was time for bed and you convinced your parents to let you stay up late, oh, you're good at convincing, you're good at persuading. You're probably going to be good at that for most of your life. And then you have also these skills, self skills focused on you. If you're good at time management, you're good at arriving on time for meetings and so on. Well, those are skills that are turned on yourself. Let's focus on those flex skills because sure, you're going to have to continually keep up your knowledge about the Salesforce ecosystem, and especially as more and more artificial intelligence is baked into those tools. But you have the most control over the skills that you develop, those flexible skills. And if I could wave my magic wand and suggest that you develop any 4 of these skills, it's to be a problem solver who is adaptive, creative, and with empathy. So, and it just so happens in English that spells pace. So a problem solver, because remember, I was telling you this is what work is. If you present yourself to an employer as a problem solver, the statistics show you're far more likely to get hired than the next person. You need to be adaptive because this is a world of exponential change. I can't tell you that the skills that you have developed today are going to be the skills that you're going to need a year or 5 years from now. So you need to continually be adapting and learning, and you can learn adaptive skills. You need to be creative. This is one of the ways it's going to keep you ahead of robots and software. And again, these are all artificially intelligent. These are all generated images from artificial intelligence. You need to be creative. You need to leverage your human creativity. You need to be continually coming up with creative solutions because that's something that a lot of the AI tools are not going to be good at for a long time. And then with empathy, it's your ability to empathize with the needs of your coworker, with the needs of a customer, with the needs of your community, with the needs of your planet. That is another unique skill. Satya Nadella, this is another ecosystem, but the Microsoft ecosystem, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says he thinks this is the human superpower. It's the most unique human skill. And developing empathy, if you use design thinking, for instance, to understand the needs of customers is critical. Mr. Benioff in the Salesforce ecosystem, he has said he thinks he can, even with all the stuff going on with Salesforce, he can lead with empathy and still do these cost cuts and layoffs and still build an empathic organization. So good luck to him on that. But if you're interested in this, if you want to learn more about being a problem solver, you can check out my book. If you want to learn more about being adaptive, my friends Chris Shipley and Heather McGowan have a book called The Adaptation Advantage. The links to these are in the deck that I sent you. If you want to learn to be more creative, Pavan Soni has a great book on design thinking. And then, and actually for empathy, Chris Shipley and Heather McGowan have a brand new book out called The Empathy Advantage. So you can learn more about each of these skills and how to bake them into your work to continually deal with the world of exponential change. All right, next question. We got only just a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap up, and then we'll make it a discussion. Okay, so how can job seekers balance the need to constantly learn and upskill with the demands of the current job? All right, so this is the challenge all of us have, right? Is this process of trying to juggle the things that are right in front of us that demand our attention, and then the things we need to do so that we can continually develop and change. So now back to mindset. And we didn't really dig into mindset, but because I said mindset eats skill set for lunch, what is mindset? How do we think about that? Well, mindset is how we prepare for what's next. If you're about to walk into a meeting, if you're about to walk into a challenging conversation with a family member, if you're about to encounter a brand new problem you've never encountered before, you have a mindset. And there's tons of different mindsets. There's we call a moonshot mindset from Singularity University. Is how can you 10x problems that you're solving, do them 10 times faster or better? There's a fixed mindset. That's kind of the old rules of work, where you just kind of want things to always be the same. If there's any mindset I could wave my magic wand and suggest that all of us develop in a world of exponential change, it's a growth mindset. Our commitment to lifelong learning, relentless learning, to being continually curious about things, having that fascination where there's this magnet that draws us, whether it's a topic that we're interested in or whatever it is that pulls us. And we don't just react to change, we embrace change, and we hopefully can actually be catalysts for change. And if you want a book that can help you to just understand that language and how to continually develop a growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck has the book to be able to check out. So now what about with your career, right? Okay, so then how do you're looking for a job, or you're trying to create work, you're trying to develop projects, you're working as a freelancer. How do you think about the process you go through? And again, I'm only sort of running through each of these pretty quickly, but I'll give you more resources to be able to point to. But when I mentioned my father wrote this book, What Color is Your Parachute? He actually had a great frame. He said, the way we make career decisions, like how we do this, there are kind of three different steps, three different elements in it. What, where, and how. And he used the cart, the horse, and the road. So the what is unique about you as a human being. That's that self-inventory or that self-knowledge. But if you had complete knowledge about your own skills and the things that you love to do and so on, that's kind of like a cart that sits there. It needs to be hooked up to a horse, which is where. So these are the scenarios, the examples, the different places where you could do work. These are different job options, different portfolio of work, places you could work. And then the how is, well, what are the steps that you go through? And the place to always start is with that self-knowledge, the self-inventory, doing skills inventory, so you know what motivates you and the skills you feel you can lead with. But there's a set of techniques that we find for the how part that is very, very useful to continually keep yourself motivated for your job search. So number one, treat it as a full-time job. If you're doing it on the side, if you have a day job, you can't. But if you are not currently employed, treat it as a full-time job. Treat it as like a 9 to 5. You're going to do this all day long. Try to pace yourself, take breaks, but do it as a full-time job. Secondly, enlist others. As much as possible, get support, get a coach, get others who are going through the process. Third, the where part, the scenarios for work, do your homework. Learn about organization, learn about the work roles. Get really good at doing informational interviewing and talking to people. Fourth, build your network. Build out on LinkedIn. Ping me on LinkedIn. Ping other people on LinkedIn. Build your network. The farther out you can go with people you don't even know, the bigger your network gets. And continually do that informational interviewing with people that you don't even know so that you can learn more about other places, other kinds of jobs, other kinds of companies that you don't know about already. And then think of that as building a coalition. Think of that as building support. Think of that as building people that you can get help from, and then you will help as well as they go through their searches. All right, so finally, the bin number 3 was about success in the ecosystem, and specifically in Salesforce. And when you think about the ecosystem you're plugging yourself into, how do you think about how you can continually provide value? Like, how can you match up to the kinds of work that you want to do and the kinds of work that you can find or create? So one of the questions was, how would you give somebody advice who's just starting out and they want to stay up to date on those latest industry practices? So I'm going to come back to some of the things that we have talked about. First off, it's so helpful to have a North Star or Southern Cross, something that pulls you, something that motivates you, something that fascinates you. And think of that as kind of like a spectrum of meaning in our lives. You know, you have lots of things that demand your attention. You've got this digital distraction machine that has just got this wave of information that is constantly coming at you. And a lot of stuff you just click away from, or you left swipe or right swipe. I can't remember which is which, but you're not interested. But then you start to see something that's fascinating to you, or at least a little interesting, and you start to get deeper and deeper, and eventually it becomes a subject. Now you're really good at it, or a hobby, or maybe it's now your work, and maybe you stop there. Maybe it's just a job. But also maybe you're finding something that continues to spark you and becomes a passion for you that you even feel is a purpose. It's one of the reasons that you're here on the planet. Now, if you don't feel that spark, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that in a world of exponential change, it can be really helpful to have things that continually draw you, that continually pull you. Again, different ecosystem, but Microsoft, one of its premises is they define thriving as being energized and empowered to do meaningful work. So you can decide what meaning means to you. Some people, it's the projects you work on. It's the problems that you're solving. Like the harder, the better. Make it complicated. Other people, it's no, my team. Like, I'll just do whatever my team wants to do because I love working with them, and so on. What I've found is that often it's topical. That is, there are subjects that are fascinating to people. So let me just give you a couple examples. So let's say that you were interested by artificial intelligence, cognitive psychology, and music theory. Well, how do you put all those things together? Oh, and you want to develop tools for people that want to be able to leverage at that intersection. Oh, well, what if I can use my knowledge of the Salesforce ecosystem and I could help a startup or a company that auto-customizes music to increase learning speed? Well, that's going to use artificial intelligence. It's going to use my knowledge of cognitive psychology, and it's going to use music theory, and all of that together is going to build tools that are going to help people to be able to learn faster. So that's an intersection. Think of this as a Venn diagram of your interests or passion. And don't think that just because you're interested in something that there isn't necessarily a way to try to weave it in. Might not do it tomorrow, but maybe the next day, maybe in the next project you work on. Or if you cared about artificial intelligence, the human-computer interface, and you probably didn't even know this is a thing, astrochemistry, chemistry on other planets. It just so happens that there is a woman that I know, and she leveraged those things together to focus on how we as humans, how we look at screens and where we're going to look next. And then finally, maybe what if you were interested in space and engineering and agriculture? Oh, well, it turns out that those are the intersection of those is autonomous tractors that are guided by satellite. And the company John Deere is making a huge investment in that. So the only reason I'm showing you these is not to say, oh, these are interests you should follow. It's more to open the aperture for the possibilities of what drives you so that you can feel that you are continually pulled. You're fascinated by the latest trends and best practices in your industry, and you're part of a community that wants to continually dive in. And then you're using the tools themselves. Remember, I was saying these are superpowers, so you can continually learn how to be able to solve new problems. Get good enough with the tools to be dangerous, to solve problems that you haven't seen before. And because they're changing so often, find a way to be fascinated by the ways you can apply those tools in your work. Okay, 2 more questions and then we're done. And then let's make it a discussion. So, and I hope what you're doing is you're popping questions into the chat, right? So, all right. So what advice would you give to graduates that are interested in starting their own businesses or being freelancers instead of working for a traditional employer? So I'm going to give you a couple of answers to that. There's a whole bunch of resources out there. There's something called the Startup Genome Project that has a lot of resources to help you to learn the skills you need. It's a global community with people that are all starting companies. There's tons of resources out there. Again, I would encourage you to do it as a team sport. And so anyway, so the whole idea then is there's an opportunity to be able to develop your own skill set to be able to solve problems in the context of starting your own company. I'm going to go back to PACE. What does an entrepreneur do? They fall in love, that's empathy, with the problem of a customer, and then they use adaptive problem solving to creatively come up with a solution, which we call an MVP, or a minimum viable product. So what you need is to learn agency, that is to continually fall in love with the problems of customers, and then be okay with the balance between the flexibility of freelance or self-started work and the variability of that work, is that it's not the same way as having a regular paycheck. And then finally, how can we help think about leveraging this experience that you've had in a boot camp, and how can you help potential employers to be able to see your value, especially if you're competing against people with traditional degrees? I started off early on saying, remember, work is about using your human skills to solve problems. Think about the way you approach potential employers. You are a problem solver. You've done the research to understand the problems they need to solve for their customers. You've talked to people who solve those kinds of problems in the kinds of jobs that they hire for. You have done your homework so you can be the kind of person who can come into that work environment, and you're not going to be a risk for them. You're going to dial down risk. That is, you're going to go into a job and you're going to immediately solve problems for them. Now, if you're willing to do that on a project basis initially, that dials down risk for the employer. It means you can each check each other out. So the more flexible you can be, and the more you position yourself as a problem solver, then however you got the knowledges, however you learned, whether it was a boot camp or for a degree, will matter less, because you actually have focused on developing the experience of solving problems. And so use the projects you have worked on in the boot camp as examples for how you have demonstrated how you understand problems, you collaborated with others to be able to solve them, and how you were able to continually focus on solving the next problem. All right, so I think we're running really close on time, but we talked about the big picture, strategies for each of you as individuals, and then the ecosystem that you're going to be plugging yourselves into. As I said, you can find me at anywhere. I'm gbolles, gbolles.com, on LinkedIn. You can email me at Gmail, gbolles@gmail. Are there any other questions? Now, I'm happy to stay. I think we talked originally about an hour, but I'm happy to stay, I think, another half hour if that's useful. So I haven't seen a lot of questions popped into the chat, but are there any questions that we should be making sure that we're covering?
Yeah, on the behalf of Clarusway team and all of our students, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you, Garry, and your knowledge and expertise is really insightful and invaluable to our students as they embark on their career shifting journeys. I think you pretty much answered all the questions they sent before, but I would like to ask students, if you would like to send your questions, please use QA chat. There is no question at the moment, Garry.
Okay.
I think it
Is
was
there anything-
really.
Do you have any questions? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, it was really enlightening me on many perspectives. Actually, we have a lot of things. I shared a couple of things that you mentioned today before with my students, but I think you really drove the big picture here, and I realized that I was sharing part of them time to time, but you really described everything well, and you answered the questions extensively. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely. So as I've mentioned, I've put my contact information in here. If any of you have additional questions or thoughts or issues, we've got tools we can point you to that can help with some of the decision-making process, and it help you see this as like the beginning of a dialogue. So if there's anything else that we can be helpful with, that you'll let me know.
Yeah. Once again, we appreciate your time and effort in speaking with our students, and we hope to have the opportunity to work with you again in the future. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insight with us, Garry. And we also want to thank to our students for their questions for tonight's event they sent in advance. And we hope that you found the information provided helpful in your own career shifting journeys. Please connect with Garry and send your questions to Garry as he shared on the chat. Thank you very much, Garry.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Be well.
And you didn't see, but on LinkedIn, there were a lot of participants. They sent a lot of emojis. Unfortunately, you cannot see it here on Zoom.
All right.
They sent applause and hearts and insights to you. So I just wanted to pass it over here.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.